I've started leveling another character recently, and I realized as I was doing it that although I've talked about how to complete the campaign quickly at League start and how to hit level 100 quickly in the current state of the endgame, I haven't actually made any videos about how to finish the campaign quickly once the League is underway, and I felt like I should do that. Hi, this is Larold, and this is my video on twink leveling, but first, don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, so one of the biggest complaints that most Path of Exile players have, one of the biggest things that people always try to beg on Reddit for GGG to remove, to no avail, is the requirement of leveling a character after the League starter from level 1 instead of starting at like level 60 or 75 or, you know, whatever it is that people want. I don't really have a dog in the fight. They make the game, I just play it. But I do think that since the game is the way that it is right now, learning to level secondary characters quickly and do that, I mean, really quickly, is a super valuable skill to develop. It makes playing new builds a lot easier since leveling is the most repetitive part of playing a new character. And, you know, usually I would say it's the least fun, but I think with leveling the last character, really the last two, since I leveled another one up into the like low 30s for this video, I think it's actually been extremely fun. Now, this isn't a strict guide because there's a ton of freedom here to do things however you like. You can definitely change things around if you want. You know, it's Path of Exile. You got a lot of freedom here. But I would like to give some recommendations on items and skills that you can use and things you can do to speed up the leveling process and make it consistently fast and smooth. But also I am looking to get better at like everything I do in life, but certainly in PoE, so I'm eager to hear feedback too. If there is something that you feel like you do while leveling second characters or an item that you use that speeds things up or just whatever it is, feel free to leave a comment about it. That is very much appreciated. If not for me, then for other people at least. So on this character here, this is a like level 33 Juggernaut. I've done, you know, one Ascendancy. I'm just at the like Aqueducts in Act 4. I am kind of using the standard Tai Killer approved setup of a Tabula Rasa, Smite, one with nothing in the just basically whatever class you start, you make a beeline over to put in one with nothing, small cluster jewel, take that. That makes you... basically, you have to take your gloves and your weapons off, as you can see, and then you count as unencumbered, and then you get massively increased attack speed, and you also get massively increased damage based off of your dexterity, and so you play a dex stacker, and that is essentially what the leveling build is. Arguably for every single class, I think for Templar and Witch, you could go another way, and that is what I have done with the Templar that I've recently been playing. It kind of provoked me to make this video, but I think at least for the 5 other characters, this is undeniably the best approach, and really, I think just for the sake of like keeping it consistent, pretty good approach to take on every single character you play. Just continuing with the TLDR version of it, once you've gotten Hollow Palm technique, once you've gotten that one with nothing active and so on, you just stack as much dex as you can. You come over here to the bottom right corner of the tree, you pick up basically all of these nodes and a lot more goodies in this area. You get yourself some leech, and then you just stack life and dex and accuracy and slam your way all the way to the end of the campaign. Kitava will be dead. It's super duper easy. And then once you finish the campaign and you feel like you're ready, you transition out of that and into your in-game build. And there you go. You can fly through the campaign in no time. And I'll even show off just a little bit of how this feels like. Again, this is an Act 4 character. I'm in the Aqueduct here, the regular Aqueduct. And I'm just going to zoom through, see if any mobs will spawn. There we go. This is about how quickly it's moving. Just one-tapping everything, you know, instantly deleting everything. Now, I do think that Juggernaut has like a pretty good advantage since this is a build that stacks dexterity. You get a lot of accuracy out of the deal, and Juggernaut has a lot of good scaling with accuracy, so it's maybe one of the better ascendancies for taking advantage of this. But, I mean, even, you know, the worst case scenario, you're playing like a Scion or a Witch or something, it still basically will just waltz through and clobber its way through absolutely everything. Everything that lives, everything that moves is just dead instantly when you see them and tap them with Smite. And it moves, as you can see, pretty quickly. We're able to kind of like take a lot of the inconvenience out of leveling, which I think is what really irritates a lot of people, including myself, away here. Like, as you can see, no mana flask already. I was dealing with like no mana flask even in Act 3. Just by getting a bit of leech somewhere in the tree, just a bit of mana leech, and that basically takes care of everything for you. Then you're running Herald of Ice and Herald of Ash, and you're getting just really smooth clear. You're doing massive single target damage as well. And then something that a lot of people might not realize, the enchants to put on your flasks don't have any sort of leveler requirement, so you can put those on Quicksilver flasks like literally from level 4, and then that's it. You know, you don't even have to hit your flasks anymore. You're able to just kind of go as much as you want. And then, you know, if you're doing nice for yourself and you have a Mage Blood set aside, then you can slap that on and really zoom. But even if you don't, you know, you're able to maintain pretty good uptime on flasks and just really zip along without even having to do like the little bit of micromanagement of hitting your flasks. Pretty convenient. So I have cooked up some path of buildings, just some very basic path of building here with trees for every single one of the classes. So we have, just to kind of run through them, I have a duelist tree here. Very basic. Again, the way that you're going to approach this every single time is you can, in fact, I'll even make a new tree just to kind of show this off. We'll call this delete, since I'm going to be deleting it as soon as I finished here. But like, all right, I'm starting a duelist. I normally won't even like pull up path of building until I'm like at the end game or so. Like that is really more when I'm going to think about it. So I'm going to start out by coming out here. Obviously my goal is to get over to the closest large jewel socket and get that socketed in and get one with nothing in. But along the way, since this isn't my first character, I'm expecting that I'm going to have some regret orbs. So I'm okay with just taking some like useful passives along the way, just make things a little bit easier for myself. And then once I get in range where I could regret my way out of all these points and put in one with nothing, I will then spec into it and get over and, you know, slap that one with nothing in and take that and then kind of backfill those points back in. And then I will basically just do that like over and over again throughout the process of leveling up. Like initially I'd come up and take in versatility and Heart of the Warrior here in this tree, and then when I got close to him, specced out of him, took Hollow Palm technique, then filled him, filled in this wheel here to get this attack mastery, then made my way over, filled them back up, made my way over toward this life and mana leech node. Once I got close to it, took him out and did that. And, then proceeded to do the same thing. So definitely you can burn through a lot of regrets if you feel like it. I think I've only gone through like 11 plus whatever you get from quests, but definitely the general approach here. Go ahead and delete that tree now. In every path of building setup here, what you're really looking to get is some combination of the following. One with nothing as fast as you can. Life and mana leech, so that you're able to just very smoothly, easily self-sustain. Some attack mastery that gives you this bonus. Non-vol strike skills target one additional nearby ally, because that makes it so that when you smite, as you can see, I'm just smiting here in my hideout. It's just hitting here, but if you're able to hit multiple smites onto enemies, that substantially increases your damage. There's potential for overlap between them as well. So that really, really makes it so that you clear through stuff significantly faster. You also want to get precise technique. You're not going to be bothering with crit. You're never going to care about crit. This does mean you will need to get some accuracy rating, so you can get that from this wheel here and this mastery that makes it so that dexterity's accuracy bonus is 3 accuracy per dexterity. You can get it from this wheel here or from this one here. This one here, as you can see, gives you flat accuracy and increased percentage and some all res. This one here gives you flat accuracy and increased accuracy and attack speed. I like this one a little more because it's a bit more offensive, but if you're struggling with your resistances, you can come over here. Sometimes you are struggling with your resistances, since in this setup you aren't able to wear weapon, shield, gloves, so you are a little limited on gear, so it's okay to take Weathered Hunter instead. But you always want to be making sure that you have more accuracy than life. Usually not that difficult in this setup, but just something to bear in mind. You then also want to come over and take Utmost Swiftness. Now, this is something you can enchant or anoint onto your neck, which in Astramentus is a perfect neck for this setup. You can anoint at Utmost Swiftness. Once you have it, you obviously don't really need it anointed anymore, and you do want to still take it. The mastery is very good. You really have 2 good options here. You can take increased attributes, that's pretty good, or you can take increased damage per 5 of your lowest attribute. That actually tends to be better in leveling than increasing your attributes across the board. Both are pretty good, but as you can see here, we got like 150 int, 200 something strength, 400 something dex, even just at this low level. And then kind of the next and final thing that I feel like is sort of mandatory is the elemental mastery. Hits have a 25% chance to treat monster elemental resistance values as inverted. This is just a huge damage increase across against a lot of enemies, any sort of like rares or anything. Like this is set up as very much like not a boss or whatever, but if we even just set it to a boss, pretty huge damage increase, like 20% against any of the act bosses, any sort of rares or anything. You're just going to shred right through them consistently. Now you can also get that up in this wheel here. This is actually a bit of a stronger wheel since you get some elemental penetration as well, as opposed to this wheel. Really not quite as good, but at least for the duelist, bit easier to get to. Now, as I said, I have set up trees for all of the characters, and for duelist, for ranger, they're both already in this bottom right corner, which is kind of where all the goodies are located. So they're in really great shape. For Marauder, it's a bit more of a stretch to get over here, but still not too bad. You know, you come get Hollow Palm Technique, then you make your way over to the bottom right, you get all the goods. Shadow is in really great shape as well for basically the same, core reason. You know, it is also a dex, partial dex class, so you're running through a lot of dex nodes to get down here to the bottom right. I would say it's in about the same shape as Marauder, maybe even a little bit better. And then Scion is arguably Scion is in the worst shape because it has the longest to go to reach a cluster jewel node. I think it's 16 points if I remember correctly. Like if we were to just check over here, left side, 16 points to node. I'm pretty sure it's 16 points to every single one of the nodes, as long as they're not, getting adjoined from over there. So yeah, a bit of a stretch for Scion. I can't even remember the last time I played a Scion. Like I literally don't remember what league it was. I'm sure it was before Blight League, so can't really say that I'm like all that thrilled about the idea of playing a Scion, but you could do it. I also made some recommendations on ascendancy choices for each of the classes. I think for Scion, again, for all of these, you can take the ascendancy that is the ascendancy of the spec you're eventually going to play, the build you're eventually going to play. Now, I have made that mistake in the past. I was playing Marauder, for example. I was going to play Chieftain, and so I just said, you know what, I'll just level as Chieftain, Hinakora, Death Fury, that'll help. And like Tesalio and Valico, those are like nice defensive value. And you know what, compared to doing Juggernaut, leveling as Juggernaut, and then once I finished specking over, it was slower to the point that it wasn't worth saving the like 40 regret orbs or whatever that I saved to add like, an extra 20-30 minutes or whatever. Like definitely not worth it. So I would say generally speaking, it's really up to you how you want to do your ascendancy, just like it's up to you how you want to do everything in Path of Exile. But in my recommendation is to just kind of play whatever is the like most optimized for leveling, and usually that is like some balance of damage and defenses and move speed, but really pretty heavy on the damage. You're kind of blasting through everything. Now, Templar and Witch are kind of the two odd classes out here. Templar, it's the very furthest you possibly could be from this wonderful set of nodes down here in the bottom right. And you really have to path a long way to get to any dex nodes at all. You come over here, you get Hollow Palm Technique. Then there are some really good nodes up here that add a lot of damage. Divine Fervor and Holy Dominion and Precision and so on. And there's also Fluid Motion nodes available. This is something that Witch kind of paths around by going just directly into the shadow area. But Fluid Motion, and I think I have another one of these gems in my inventory here, or my unique tab. Let's see, Careful Planning and Fluid Motion are both two pretty interesting jewels that you can slap into your passive tree that will convert all the strength in the area or all the int in the area into dex, and that can be really, really good for this and kind of help make Templar, which, it's not like the best tree start location for getting these valuable things that you want, like Leech and Utmost Swiftness and Precise Technique and all of that accuracy. Like, that's not ideal, but you're able to do this. And as you can see, this is, 108 dexterity that you're able to get out of this Fluid Motion jewel, like 13% of your damage. And, then you got another one over here that you could drop in and potentially take some more points around here. And then for Witch, again, it's a fairly similar situation, but you're not having to go quite as far to get into the dex nodes. You come up and take Hollow Palm, and you are able to slap in a Careful Planning here and get some kind of like some conversion in this area as well. I don't know that you really need to take that one int node there, but you know, you're able to make your way over, come through this elemental mastery node, and just get a lot of like valuable stuff along the way to precise technique and the utmost swiftness attribute mastery situation down in the bottom right corner. Now, something that I was playing around with on Templar for leveling, because I kind of wanted to play something that was a bit more along the lines of a caster build, like a Hierophant. I can't remember ever actually playing a Hyro before. And I just kind of wanted to play something that felt a bit more like a caster. And so I did that by playing with Stormbrand. And I ran Stormbrand from level 12 on. I had a Stormbrand of Indecision sitting around. They're not particularly expensive. Like we'll double check here, but let's just say like not corrupted, whatever quality, whatever level, 5-10 chaos, nothing special. So if we just run a Blood Aqueduct here, and this is not with a Mage Blood on, although it is obviously much faster than Mage Blood and everything. This is just with regular Flasks, not a Mage Blood, just using a cheapo replica Prism Weave. And let's see if we can get any guys to spawn here. Surely there will be. All right, there we go. Moving pretty quickly, definitely zipping through guys, zooming, like not quite as fast as the Smiter, obviously, but honestly not bad. And definitely once I slap on the Mage Blood, it's faster, although, that's a bit of a cheat code. Yeah, but pretty happy with how quickly this was moving, I have to say. Like, really getting a lot of move speed out of this. Definitely, I don't know what my played on this character is. I haven't finished the campaign yet. I have no idea what my played is. I AFK'd on this character for like hours and hours and hours while like eating and making food and taking out the trash or whatever, so I'm not even gonna look at that. But with that being said, /devs 0. And the same on the Marauder. Like, never felt even remotely close to dying at any point while leveling this character. Just very, very smooth leveling experience with Stormbrand of Indecision. Absolutely shreds through bosses in a way that I wasn't expecting. Clearly, as you can see, shredding through trash very easily. And then if we want to just like slap on the Mage Blood just to kind of demonstrate what it looks like when it's really zooming, just run through another Blood Aqueduct instead of continuing the campaign just to do it. Just for fun. Yeah, I mean, as you can see, zippity zooming. Really, really, moving pretty quickly. Very happy with the with the leveling pace. Man, this really exceeded my expectations. I mean, like I said, I think a lot of people really don't like leveling an alt or whatever, don't like leveling a second character and just want to skip all over this. You know what? I normally would feel the same way, but like this is, I was having a lot of fun, clearly, as I was working on this and thinking about about this. No, this is fun. This is what I'm looking for in the mapping experience, and I'm getting it while I'm still doing the campaign. So I'm very happy with that. That is definitely what I'm looking for when I'm playing Path of Exile, and I'm getting it a lot sooner than I expected. So now I thought I would talk about the uniques that I think are optimal to wear in the Smite setup. And I think the standard helm, and it is the one that I've put into the POB, I've put all of the kind of good unique options into the POB. I have the sort of standard ones equipped: Gold Rim, Tabula Rasa, 7 League Step for boots, of course. Astramentus for your neck. You're really not going to do any better than that for this neck. And then you have some options as far as like ring and belt go. Those are probably your biggest wiggle room spots, but you can also wiggle your helm around. I'm running a Thrill Steel instead of a Gold Rim. That is not available until level 18, but it gives you permanent onslaught, which is pretty nice. 20% increase move and attack and cast speed. Pretty good. Now, in terms of rings, Praxis is maybe not required. It's something you can play around with. You also have Call of the Void as an option, which is pretty hilarious that is such a good leveling item, but it is. You only need to be level 16 to be able to use it, and all damage with hits can chill. It makes it so that you can chill, makes it so that you are basically chilling and freezing enemies all the time and causing them to pop, and then that has that great synergy with Herald of Ice so that everything's shattering and you're getting massive clear all the time. You're also, reducing the enemy damage a lot due to that final line there as well. And then your other ring option, you can use Lihip of All. That'll give you like a combination of a lot of stats, a lot of damage, and a lot of all res. And you can run some other rings. I have played around with Praxis a lot in the past. If you're not able to get Mana Leech yet, Praxis is really helpful for keeping your mana under control, making it so that you're not requiring a Mana Flask. You know, that's really, really nice. I like Praxis a lot for just dealing with mana, making it a non-issue, but not really useful for anything other than dealing with mana. You can play around with like Barracks Grip. Some of the Barracks rings are okay, but really nothing quite competes with like Lihip and Call of the Void for this setup. As for your belt options, Prism Weave is just really, really, really good. It adds a massive amount of damage, you know, fire, cold, and lightning damage. It adds elemental res, all res. It adds damage with attack skills during flask effects. And since you're probably going to be automating your flasks for convenience, that's going to be up a lot of the time. Now, of course, there are some other belt options. You can use Darkness Enthroned. It's usable from level 1. People really like this. It's kind of a go-to belt for a lot of people. And the issue I have with it, the only real issue with it, is that you have to make sure that the Abyss Jewels are like usable at your level. But if you get Abyss Jewels that have like life and just any sort of damage roll on them at all with melee attacks, because Smite is technically a melee, then you know, that's going to be multiplied by anywhere from 50 to 100% increased effect on both of those jewels, and it's really going to add up to a lot of damage and also a lot of life, which is pretty nice, especially as you get a little higher level. You can get higher level Abyss Jewels and really add a ton of stats, but the problem is sort of like it's supposed to be a good belt to use at low levels, but then the Abyss Jewels aren't necessarily low levels, so either way. You can also just get a String of Servitude, like a level usable from level 1. You can get like increased max life on it or something. That's pretty nice. I like Perandus Blazon a lot. It gives you like all attributes, fire res, and flask duration. Pretty good for a low level belt. So for the Stormbrand setup, and really for any sort of caster setup where you go, you know, I don't want to level as Smite, I want to level as a caster. This character is going to be a caster long term. I want to kind of maintain that castery feel to it. The unique setup is a little different. I'm playing around with a Ghost Writhe because this build is all blues and this is an energy shield piece of armor, and I just saw like, hey, that's something different, but a Tabula Rasa is still the ideal option here as well. And then you don't necessarily need to run Astramantis as the amulet. I have, just that kind of out of convenience, but I don't necessarily think it's the best one. I think generally speaking, Stone of La Joie is actually really good for casters. A ton of cast speed, ton of mana, ton of int, like actually really good as something you can use from like very early on. Karui Ward and Replica Ward are also just really good options you can use from the very start of leveling. They give you 10% increased move speed each. They give you dex. This one gives you strength and accuracy and like proj effects. The Replica Karui Ward gives you int and increased AoE and increased AoE damage, which arguably a little bit better than a regular one, but I just don't have one on hand. Something you can use until you're able to use an Astramantis on the Smite build, but on this build, you know, potentially you could just use a Stone of La Joie until you like kill Kitava for the second time, like totally an option. So I do have a full set of recommended uniques for this Stormbrand setup. No Mage Blood in here, you know, Replica Prism Weave works just like Prism Weave, gives you just a bunch of elemental damage on your spells, a bunch of all res, and a bunch of elemental damage during flasks, so pretty good for that. And this is a very cheap belt, like, you know, 5-10 chaos, something like that. Super common, super cheap. Definitely not as good for speed as a Mage Blood, but you know, for 10 chaos you're getting a lot more bang for your buck out of the deal. And then, of course, 7 League Step is going to be ideal. Tabula Rasa is going to be ideal. You don't have to run SNS Gentle Touch, but it's something you can run from level 25. You can just run, like, rare gloves or, you know, other crappy, unique gloves like Deidre's Tenure maybe isn't so great, but, like, Loctonial Caress are honestly something you can run from level 1 until, like, level 25, and then switch over to SNS. It's pretty convenient. And, again, this is a pair of gloves that are 10 chaos. Nothing all that special. So Dream Fragments is a ring that I like for leveling because it gives you chill and freeze immunity, and then also gives you a lot of mana correcting stats and also a ton of cold res. Basically fixes cold res on its own for you. It's not quite as good as Praxis for fixing mana, but it's not that far off. and it also gives you like some cold value, so that's pretty good. And then Circle of Regret is something I've slapped on recently. I think I was running Praxis before just to make mana kind of trivial, but I found that I've scaled my mana up so much as a Hierophant that I don't really need it. So I was able to run a Circle of Regret, and then I'm running Herald of Thunder since it's a lightning build, getting a lot of a lightning value out of this. Not that it's necessarily required, but just, you know, kind of like the Ghost Writhe. Something I thought like, hey, I'll play around with this, see if there's anything to it, and then you know what, it kind of is. And then I think the real combo here, the real thing that I'm like super happy about, is just this combo right here of Nycta's Lantern and Wreath of Freesia is really, really good for casters while leveling. Now, Wreath of Freesia is kind of a crappy helmet, right? It has no attribute requirements, has no stats, doesn't really have much going on. All it really does is it makes it so, first of all, you can't do any chaos damage, so don't have any chaos damage in the build. And also it makes it so that like increases and reductions to light radius, the joke of all stats, also apply to damage and then apply to AoE at 50% of their value. And then the way that you're able to juice that is by running Nycta's Lantern, which adds a lot of damage, and it has Battle Mage on it, which makes it so that your main hand weapons damage is added to your spell damage. So that means that you do actually want to quality this up, and you kind of do want to have a good damage roll on it. And it also gives you a ton of light radius. So there's a synergy there between these two items, and they really add a ton of damage. Like in this setup here, I'll switch this over to Stormbrand. I'll switch this tree over to the Stormbrand Templar that I'm running. And here we go. We're all Stormbranded up. This is all aligned. If I drop that weapon, I lose like 60% damage. If I drop the helm, I lose like 17% damage. Pretty good synergy between the two for a couple of like truly 1 chaos, 3 chaos uniques. Just cheapo junk. And yet they are adding a massive amount of damage that is helping this build basically clear, like, you know, clear through leveling as fast as pretty much any build I could possibly hope for, while also, you know, again, being like completely unkillably tanky. So pretty happy with that. Now, as for leveling skills, the skill you use at level 2 is kind of up to you. A lot of people, I think Tai Killer, for example, recommends just using Caustic Arrow on every character from level 2 up until you're able to use Smite. I like Caustic Arrow a lot. I definitely always use it on the Ranger. I don't think that's necessarily a bad recommendation at all. But, you know, I like to use Caustic Arrow whenever it's available. I do like Splitting Steel. That is what I used on the Marauder that I just leveled up to like 30 something. I used that until like level 12, and then it's 13, whatever it was, and then switched over to Smite. I do that on Marauder and Duelist. I'll use Splitting Steel. I'll use Rolling Magma on any caster. You know, this character, this Hierophant, I did level with Rolling Magma. Not my favorite spell, not my favorite at all, but it really does the most damage. It definitely is the strongest spell to level with in the first act of the game. And then on the Shadow, I usually will level with Stormblast Mine. Again, not everybody's favorite. You can just get Caustic Arrow. I mean, you know, ultimately, you can get Caustic Arrow on any character. You just come to Lily and buy Caustic Arrow from her at level 2. After you've killed Hillock, slap it into a bow that you buy from a vendor, and, you know, that will definitely work. It's really up to you what you want to run from level 2 to level 12, basically for all of Act 1. I just kind of like running the things that are like thematically consistent, basically that either are given to you by NPCs for killing Hillock, or like that you would make sense to be able to buy from, you know, from one of them in town in Lionized Watch. Now I have set up just sort of recommended support gems for each of these skill setups here. For Smite, it's Ruthless Ancestral Call, added fire damage, faster attacks, and then elemental damage with attacks. Elemental damage with attacks is the one outlier. You're able to use Smite, the whole Smite setup, or somewhere in the like low teens, whereas elemental damage with attacks requires level 18, so you can use main support prior to that, but then you want to drop it for LE damage with attacks once that's available. For the Stormbrand setup, it is usable from level 12, and that is ultimately when I swapped over to it. I did experiment with a lot of other stuff, but you know, you can use added lightning damage. I think I also use added cold damage in there, and there aren't a ton of support gems available at like level 12. You know, there's like increased crit chance or increased crit strike support. Like I did run that for a little bit, but like there's a lot of stuff that just isn't really great for it. I think I ran like Arcane Surge, added lightning damage, increased crits, and I think I was running added cold damage. And then I don't even remember what I was running as my 6th option. I might have just literally been running as like a 5 link and playing around with like several brands until I hit like the 18 mark, and then started to fold in some more like interesting other options like conk effect and power charge on crit. And that is really when things started to kind of take off. Once I hit like level 18 is really when the build started to feel like it was a bit more real. So definitely a little bit slower to get rolling than the Smite build, but like I was getting to feel like I was playing a caster instead of just the same exact Smiter that I've played a million times. As you can see, I've also recommended some auras and like mobility skill for each of these different, each of these 2 builds here. Frostblink I kind of prefer for the Stormbrand setup because you actually get like a good chunk of damage out of it. I think this is hitting for like 8,000 or 9,000 damage. Yeah, so like as you can see in some of the clips of me playing, the Frostblinks alone can kill monsters on their own. That's definitely not something you're going to get on the Smiter. And so for Smite, Flame Dash all the way, but for Stormbrand, you know, Frostblink will do pretty nicely. I have elemental weakness here in the Smite setup because like it is good. I never actually use it. I don't even think I bought one on this character yet. Like maybe if you have something that's going to stay alive for a really long time, you can use the War Chief and elemental weakness, but you know, it's up to you. Ultimately, I usually just smite stuff to death very, very quickly and it doesn't matter. For the Stormbrand setup, as I said, I am using S&S Gentle Touch, so I'm getting Temp Chains on everything. So I'm not bothering with a curse, trying not to really bother with anything other than just kind of right-clicking and moving, right-clicking and moving. That's kind of the whole goal with each of these 2 setups, and really I'm enjoying that aspect of it. I do have Brand Recall attached to automation support, and I'm just getting those Brand Recalls since Brand Recall causes the brands to trigger again and do damage again, and the brand is doing a lot of damage all the time. So yeah, you know, I do like that, have just sort of having them follow me around all the time while like moving through a zone. The one thing I would maybe consider is dropping Swift Brand support so they actually last longer, and you know, they won't do as much damage in single target, sustained single target, but they would last longer to actually follow me around. So that's something I may consider playing around with, you know, something to think about. I definitely think there's a lot of room to play around with other skills in this setup. This could just be kind of like a base template. You would drop the brand stuff, obviously, and play with other stuff. But like, I played with Absolution a little bit. I think Absolution could be super duper fun. You can come up and take like Spiritual Aid, take a lot of minion nodes, and make Absolution really, really strong as well. I do remember playing around with it in the past and really, really loving it. So I think that could work in the same, more or less the same basic setup as this. Again, I think there's a lot of room to play with other skills. I just really like the play style of brands. It's something I hadn't really touched in a long time, and definitely the experience of like dropping these bad boys in a map or area while leveling and just moving through and then just having them snap to me and auto clear is immensely satisfying. Recommending Flasks. I think that just having like a bunch of Quicksilvers while in the kind of first act or 2, Quicksilver's life and mana, you know, kind of the obvious setup for the first act or 2, but then once you get a little further in, having a silver flask mixed in there with a couple of Quicksilvers is really good. As soon as you're able to phase out that mana flask, it really is ideal. Big quality of life improvement. You do want to keep making sure that you're upgrading your life and mana flasks as you're going through the first few acts, and then once you're able to, you can either try to swap to like a Bismuth flask is really nice to have. Like, it really helps with fixing your elemental resistances on either of these builds, but especially on the Smite build, having a Bismuth flask, just, it gives you a lot of all res in a build that is like missing a bunch of pieces of gear and is running a tabula, and it's just like, you know, also probably running 7 League Step, so it's just very light on resistances, so it's really nice to have that come from a flask. And then, you know, Jade Flask, Granite Flask, that's okay to kind of give yourself a little bit more defensive value. Sulfur Flask is okay for a bit more damage, you know, whatever. Ultimately, there are 3 ways, and I think we'll finish on mana here. I think there are basically 3 ways to fix mana, and the main one that you do in the Smite build is you just come down and you take Mana Leech. You can either get it here, right here, that 1 point, or you can get it from here, the Clever Thief setup, and you can even take 10% of Leech being instant. That makes you really, really tanky on the builds that are already kind of up in this area. So like Witch and Shadow and arguably Ranger are kind of up here. That's convenient. So Leech is really good. The other one for the build that I'm playing here, the brand build, is just to have a great big mana pool. Like, I got a lot of mana You know, I regen it real fast. And that's just sort of like Hierophant privilege. That's kind of what we're doing here. You know, I'm not even getting Arcane Surge, but obviously I would be getting even more mana regen if I were actually hitting something. And then I think for Witch, the other thing you can do is take Eldritch Battery. I think Eldritch Battery basically fixes your mana the exact same way that just having a big mana pool does for the Hierophant. Just having Eldritch Battery as any flavor of Witch will just completely solve mana for you as well. And that's really kind of it for solving like the big inconveniences of leveling. You know, you have automated most of the processes that are kind of annoying, like hitting your flasks and taking care of mana. All you really have to do is zoom through, like hit your mobility skill and your damage skill, and just keep doing those two things over and over again until everything in the campaign, including Kitava, is dead, and then you can switch over to your in-game build and start blasting through the in-game. All right, I think that pretty much covers it. Have fun leveling and good luck with your next build. Thanks for watching. Bye.